Welcome to my webinar on how to stop taking things personally. Um, I don't know where you're listening to this from, where you're tuning in, where you're watching, but I want to know that you're really, really welcome in this space. This is a topic that has been really resonating with lots of you. So every time I put content out on Instagram to do with this topic, it gets such a huge response. And I think that it is touching on something that lots of us struggle with. So I hope that this webinar is going to be helpful and useful. I hope you're going to be able to leave with a couple of little nuggets of insight and application and things that you can start putting into practice. So just take a moment to maybe take a deep breath in and breathe out again and just settle in to this time that you've got with me here. Perhaps you want to turn your phone off if you're watching on your laptop. Just get rid of any distractions. And we want to try and be as present as we can in the moment to be able to really tune in to our bodies, to listen to what's being shared, to be able to reflect on some of the things that we're going to reflect on. There's going to be a few moments of silence just to be able to reflect on a few questions that are going to come up throughout the webinar. You might want to grab a notebook, you might want to grab a pen and just take some notes if you enjoy doing that or if you find that helpful when you're learning. But you'll be able to pause, to rewind, to watch bits again, to take some notes on the slides. Hopefully, all of the content in here is going to be really useful and helpful. So, my name is Judy, and I am a psychology graduate. I studied psychology quite a long time ago, it seems now, and I've always been fascinated really in understanding people and understanding why we behave the way that we do as humans. What makes us tick? What makes us who we are? And I went on to work in the charity sector for a number of years before retraining as a psychotherapist. So my training is in what is called Adlerian therapy, and that's purely because I happened to go to a therapist when I was in my late 20s, and I was really struggling with some of my own mental health kind of challenges. And the Adlerian therapy for me was just so incredibly useful and helpful. It gave me so much insight into myself, stuff that I'd never really understood before. I'd never really understood why I struggled with certain things in the way that I did. And I became really fascinated and interested in Adlerian all things Adler and all things Adlerian psychology. I'm also a content creator, so I have my own private practice and business, and then a lot of my time now is spent creating content on Instagram and doing workshops and bits of psychoeducation and training. And I absolutely love communicating. I love taking big ideas and making them simple. I love creating little short bits of content on Instagram because I think that for lots of people, therapy is not maybe that affordable or that accessible, but actually there's so many other ways that we can access little short forms of content and little bits of theory and insights from therapy that can be useful and helpful. And I know that lots of people that I know in my own life, friends, family, followers, will often text me and say, Judy, I was in this situation and this little bit of content came to mind, and it just really reminded me of something that you had said. Um, so I am also a wife. I'm a mum to two little girls. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a volunteer. I'm a leader. I'm a part of lots of different communities. And the reason that I say that really is that my identity is so much bigger really than just being a therapist. I come to you, and I'm bringing this stuff to you as a fellow human, as somebody who is equal, who is on this journey of life with you, who also struggles with these things. I'm not just, giving you all this information as somebody who has it all together or who knows all the answers. I've got a little bit of expertise and knowledge to share and experience, but I'm also someone who is always learning. So, by the end of this webinar, I really hope that you're going to be able to understand better why you take things personally through the lens of Adlerian psychology. And I hope that you're going to be able to realize and recognize more when you're getting stuck in that inferiority loop and how to step out of it. And I hope that you're going to be able to leave with three different practical tools that you can start putting into practice that's going to help you build a stronger, more secure sense of self. So I wonder, do any of these sound familiar? Perhaps you replay conversations over and over in your head, and you go over in your mind social interactions that have happened, and you wonder, did I offend that person? Did somebody misunderstand what I meant there? How did I come across? What was that person thinking of me? Perhaps you interpret quite neutral things as rejection. So let's say, a colleague walks into the office, somebody that you know really well, but actually this one morning they don't say hi, they don't say hello, and you start to think, oh, have I done something to upset them? Have I done something to offend them? Why are they a bit off with me? Or perhaps you hear feedback or constructive criticism in a way that feels like a personal attack. So maybe it's even a friend who's just trying to gently bring up something with you that they want to talk about, and instantly your defenses go up. Why are they bringing this up with me? Why are they talking to me and not this other person? Perhaps you often assume other people's moods or emotions are your fault. Okay, somebody else is really disappointed by something, and you start thinking, gosh, could I have done something? Have I contributed to that? Is that my fault in some way? Or maybe you take someone else's boundary quite personally. You ask for help quite specifically, and somebody says no. I'm not actually able to help at the moment. I don't feel like I've got the capacity. And instantly you think, oh, I wish I hadn't asked. Am I too much? Did I ask too much? I shouldn't have said anything in the first place. Well, if you were looking at all of those and thinking tick, 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 well, you are in good company. You are not alone. This is such a common struggle, and feeling inferior or not good enough is such a common thing. So, what do we really mean by taking things personally? Well, essentially, it's when we overinterpret or over attribute other people's behaviors, moods, or words as a direct reflection of our own worth. Okay. And especially during moments that feel quite uncertain or shaky, or when there's a bit of disconnect, when we don't really know where we stand with someone, perhaps, but even when there's little or no evidence for it. And it is one of the most common ways that inferiority shows itself in relationships. And the impact of it is huge, right? It costs us, it's costly. Often we end up overthinking and replaying things. We end up in this state of hypervigilance where we are constantly sort of on edge, on guard. That fight or flight mode, that nervous system is activated a lot of the time. We feel anxious in social situations. Perhaps there's a mistrust relationally when it comes to other people, and it disconnects us. Right? Ultimately, taking things personally has a disconnecting movement. It isolates us from the very things that we long for, which is actually belonging and acceptance and love. And ultimately, it's exhausting, right? These things are exhausting. So I want you to just pause for a moment to reflect. Perhaps grab your journal, make a few notes on your phone. When was the last time that you took something personally, right? I wonder if a situation comes to mind. And what was the story that you told yourself? I'm just going to leave a minute or two to think about this. You might want to just pause the recording at this point, and give yourself a little bit of time to do this. Or perhaps you want to take the questions away and you want to think about them a little bit more when you've got a bit more time. So, why do we take things personally? Well, to understand that, I want to take us right back to who was Alfred Adler, right? Who is this person behind this Adlerian therapy and all of these theories? So Adler was a doctor originally, and then he became a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and a kind of thinker, and a philosopher, I suppose, in a way. He lived in Austria at exactly the same time, actually, as Freud. So he was part of all of those early kind of conversations, that early movement in psychodynamic therapy, and psychoanalysis. But he ended up thinking and believing quite different things to Freud. So he separated himself quite a lot from what Freud believed. He became the father of what was known as individual psychology. You might have heard of that phrase, you might not have. His ideas have influenced many of the modern approaches like CBT CBT, like humanistic therapy, like lots of our kind of trauma-informed therapies. And there's lots of kind of theories and reasons as to maybe why people haven't heard of him that much, why he was not that famous. I mean, I studied psychology. I don't ever remember learning about Adler, which is a real shame in a sense because his work and his theories were so incredibly inspiring and have so much to offer us in terms of psychology. And I think, partly it was because he didn't really care about fame as much. He wasn't as into kind of notoriety as perhaps Freud was. He was more interested in just helping his patients. But what were some of his core ideas? Well, Adler believed that we are wired for connection and belonging. So, right back when we are born into the world as a child, we are striving to try and fit in, to be accepted. And ultimately, that begins in our family of origin. So, when we don't feel accepted, when we don't feel that sense of unconditional love, when we don't feel like we kind of belong in a way that we're equal, we start to adapt ourselves. We adapt our behavior, we change ourselves, we morph, we blend in order to fit in. And we start to form what he called mistaken beliefs about ourselves, about other people, about what it means to be safe. And these kind of things are things like, I need to be perfect in order to belong. In order to feel good inside, I need to make sure that everybody else is happy too. Or in order to feel good inside, I need to make sure that I'm right or that I'm in the right. And these patterns start to become cemented. And this is what Adler calls lifestyle. And he called lifestyle essentially the lens through which we see the world, the way that we move through life. But it's actually something that he believed can be shifted and changed. It's not something that we're inherently born with. It's not an innate thing, a little bit like kind of personality. It's not fixed or rigid. It's actually how we've learned to interpret things. And it's something that we can work on and we can change. And he believed that that sense of inferiority is universal. Right? We're all born into the world feeling inferior, but it is how we respond to that sense of inferiority that shapes ultimately our mental health. So some people will get stuck in that sense of feeling inferior, and that's what we kind of commonly know or see as maybe really low self-esteem. But other people will start striving and overcompensating. And so what you maybe see is somebody who is trying to be perfect or to be the best or to be right all the time or in control. And this is, in a way, a response to feeling inferior. So the more inferior we feel, the harder we have to strive in order to prove our worth. And that sense of inferiority, discouragement, feeling like we don't belong is at the heart and is at the root of so many mental health challenges and struggles. No matter what a client comes through my door with in terms of a presenting issue, let's say it's depression or addiction or stress or relationship issues, all of those things will somewhere at the root have a sense of feeling inferior or not good enough. So, what does this have to say then about why we take things personally? Well, Adler believed that all of our behavior has a purpose, right? We do not behave in a way that is, overly reactive or being mean to somebody or interpreting something or taking something personally. We don't do it for no reason. Right? There is always a reason for behavior. All behavior has a purpose. And essentially, when we're taking things personally, it has a benefit, right? Or else we wouldn't do it. So, in a way, it keeps us safe. Ultimately, that's what it's doing. It's keeping us, giving us that sense of safety. It's giving us a sense of control. So, if I cause the problem, then maybe I can fix it, right? It's a way of protecting our place in the group. Perhaps if I can change myself or adapt myself, then they might like me more, right? Sometimes it's also quite a familiar, a safe, a comfortable role to play, especially if we have learned to be a certain way in the world. Perhaps we've learned to be the fixer in relationships or the pleaser or the one who is right. These roles can start to feel quite familiar and quite safe. And it also just gives us an explanation for discomfort. It's easier sometimes to believe that maybe I did something wrong or that I'm in the wrong than actually to sit with the unknown. So this is why even when our behavior is costing us, right, going right back to that slide and we looked at all of the ways that it impacts us, the anxiety, the hypervigilance, the overthinking, the disconnection, even when our behavior is costing us or sometimes adding to our suffering in a way, we still continue to do it. because it is giving us some benefit. So, what is the inferiority loop? Well, what happens is there is some sort of a trigger. Okay, so something happens, like for example, let's just say you've crafted this message in WhatsApp and you put this into a WhatsApp group and maybe it has a question at the end, right? And it's a group of friends and nobody responds to your message, nobody says anything, right? And instantly, what starts to happen is you start to make these interpretations. The mistaken beliefs start to kick in. Well, actually, what everybody replied to somebody else's message and they didn't to mine. So what is that about me? Do people not like me? Do people not value me? The body starts to remember those feelings that come up, that sense of shame or insignificance or that we don't matter, that people don't care about us. Is we're remembering feelings that actually probably happened in childhood. Our nervous system starts to become activated. So we instantly go into that fight or flight mode. We can feel it in our body. We can feel the adrenaline. We can feel that sense of feeling tense or our breath becoming quicker. And then all the protective strategies start to kick in. Okay, so we go into what is our natural kind of protective strategies. Perhaps it's withdrawing. Okay, well, I'm not gonna put anything in the chat anymore. Clearly, those people don't care about me as much as I thought. Maybe they're all closer to each other than they are that with me. Well, I'm just gonna pull back, right? I'm gonna protect myself so that I don't get hurt. Or perhaps we go into defensiveness or over explaining or people pleasing. And the impact of all of these things is disconnection, right? It's actually moving us away from, again, that thing that we long for, which is actually to belong and to be accepted. And then that sense of inferiority just becomes deeper, right? We've given ourselves evidence actually to reinforce the belief that was already there. See, I told you I'm not good enough. I knew that actually I didn't belong. I shouldn't have even tried that in the first place because actually I knew that actually nobody cares about me, right? The sense of inferiority starts to deepen and is reinforced, and then the whole cycle just starts all over again. And that cycle can often feel instantly automatic, right? This is not something that we're often very aware of that's happening. It feels it's like a well-worn path, a well-trodden path. So let's pause again for a moment, and I want you to think, what are some of your triggers? What are some of the things for you that trigger this inferiority loop? Perhaps for you, it is being left out of things, not being included. Perhaps it's being spoken over or being dismissed. Perhaps it's feeling like people don't listen to us or take us seriously. What are some of those triggers for you that bring out that sense of inferiority? And what are some of the protective strategies that you tend to fall into? So just pause the recording for now and take a moment to maybe journal some of these things. Self-awareness is going to be your superpower when it comes to stopping taking things personally. When it comes to overcoming inferiority, insight and self-awareness is going to be such an important tool because without self-awareness, we can't change. Right? This is the first step of being able to actually make significant changes is to become aware, is to bring all of that stuff that was perhaps in our blind spot into our awareness and to be able to look at it and reflect on it. And it's to start asking ourselves questions like these. What is the story that I'm telling myself here? Right? What's the narrative that is going on for me in this situation? And is it true? Right? Is it true? Am I assuming too much? What's a different perspective? What else might be going on here? Perhaps what am I feeling in my body? Right? How do I know that this inferiority loop is being kicked off? Well, actually, I start to recognize it in the way that my body responds and reacts. What does this remind me of? Right? When have I felt this way before? And these are the three Adlerian tools that I want to teach you to try and help you build a stronger sense of self. And the first one is the most fundamental, and it is learning to see yourself as equal. In Adlerian therapy, Adler describes it like this in a way. It's that essentially all of us either see ourselves in life as being inferior, so being less than, being inadequate, and being there being something different about us, something wrong with us, not being good enough, or we see ourselves as superior, right? We are perhaps better than other people. We are right all the time. We like to be the best at things. We want to impress people. And it's almost like a little bit like being on a ladder. Okay, we're constantly trying to edge ourselves out of this feeling of inferiority. So that feeling of inferiority comes with a great sense of shame in a way, right? It's not something that is pleasant. Most of us want to get ourselves out of feeling that way. So what we do is we start to strive, we start to overcompensate, we start to do things in order to make ourselves feel good or to impress other people or to please other people. But in a way, it's a little bit like it's the wrong solution to the problem. Okay, doing these things, striving, all of these protective strategies are not actually helping us to feel good enough. What we have to do is something a lot more radical. We have to change this axis, right? This one that is a little bit almost like a slippery pool is the way I describe it to clients. It's like we're trying to climb up this greasy pool and we can't really get a grip and we keep falling back down again. We have to change it completely. So we have to go from this vertical axis of inferiority down here and superiority up here to actually being a horizontal axis where we are equal to other people. Right? We're on an equal level playing field. And that means that any kind of striving towards improvement or change, we're doing it for ourselves. We're not doing it to compete with other people, to be better than other people, to prove anything. We're doing it in a much more equal way where we're all contributing to the world, where our efforts of striving and trying to do things are actually contributing to the lives of others. They're not things that are we're doing just to prove that we're good enough or to get ourselves out of feeling inferior. So, this is the first one. And essentially, this means starting to rewire our brain and starting to reframe some of these old beliefs to things like I am equal in terms of value and worth. I'm not better or worse than anyone else. I might have different strengths and weaknesses, different life experiences and personality traits, but ultimately I am equal, right? I do not have to prove my worth because I know that I belong. And this is the core, the heart of the work that we do in Adlerian therapy. It's reframing these early beliefs that we've formed about self and about other people in the world. And it's gently loosening the protective strategies that we've developed in order to feel safe or accepted or in control. So, number two is this idea called the separation of tasks. And essentially, what Adler meant by this is that we all have our own task in life. And I want you to imagine it a little bit like you are in the middle of this kind of circle or this kind of bubble. And what's inside your circle is everything that you're responsible for. So that's your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions, your values, your behaviors, your choices, right? Creating a meaningful life for yourself. All of this is within your responsibility. And what is somebody else's responsibility is what's in their circle, right? So, exactly the same things their thoughts, their feelings, their reactions, their values, their choices, all of these things. And what often happens in life is we end up overextending our responsibility into somebody else's circle, right? We confuse the two tasks in life. It gets blurry, it gets meshed together. We start to feel responsible for how other people feel. And sometimes we extend too much judgment or opinions into somebody else's task and into what they're actually responsible for. So learning to separate our tasks in life is so, so helpful because it stops us taking responsibility for what isn't ours. And for most of us, that means letting go of so many things. Okay, most of us carry far too much responsibility for how other people feel and for how other people think and for fixing or helping or rescuing other people. But it also helps us to know when we do need to repair, right? Because there are going to be times actually where we think we've taken something personally, but maybe we do actually have something that we need to say sorry for or to repair or to fix in some way. And knowing our own values and having a secure sense of self helps us know when we do need to do this, when actually we need to let go of unnecessary guilt, and when we need to repair. So, in order to do this, in order to separate our identity from others, we have to learn to strengthen that sense of self, to define our edges a bit more, to become a bit more secure. Oftentimes, we use the word insecurity because we feel sometimes very insecure in terms of our sense of self. So, we want to move to a place where that sense of self becomes more secure. And we can start by asking ourselves again some of these questions. Is this my stuff or their stuff? right? In terms of this interaction and what's happened, hang on a second. Is this my stuff? Am I responsible for this actually? Is this mine to own? And then actually, what do I think of what I said? Did I act in line with my values? Let me just reflect for a second. What do I know to be true about me, right? And my own intentions. I know that I didn't mean it in that way. So, learning to listen to our own internal voice is a big part of this, listening to ourselves and being able to answer some of those questions. Hang on a second, what do I think of what I said? Right? Stops us from overplaying and rethinking all of these situations. And there are going to be times in life when people are genuinely upset with us or annoyed. Sometimes there's going to be conflict, there's going to be tension, we're going to disappoint people, there's going to be misunderstandings. But taking things less personally isn't about ignoring that, right? It's not about kind of pulling everything in and saying, actually, I don't care. Just let them be how they're going to be. I'm not going to in any way, take that on. Actually, it's about knowing what's ours and what isn't ours. Because when our sense of self is secure, right? When that sense of self is strong, even some of those big and biggest fears, the biggest fears that we hold in life, like people misunderstanding us or people judging us or feeling rejected by people or people being disappointed in us, they start to lose their grip, right? They lose their power over us. We start to actually be able to comprehend that actually it might be okay for somebody to not like me. That doesn't have to shake my sense of self-worth. And these are some of the things that, in a way, we need to let sink in deep. These are some of the roots that we need to grow at the foundation of our lives. Things like, I'm not perfect, and that's okay. It's not a reflection of my worth whenever I make a mistake. I know that fundamentally I'm valuable just as I am. My worth doesn't depend on what other people think of me. My voice matters, my presence matters, my perspective matters here, my feelings matter. I don't need to prove my worth in every conversation. And I am capable of handling discomfort. I'm capable of handling difficult feelings. And ultimately, I am equal. I'm an equal person. And thirdly, social interest. This is something which I am incredibly passionate about. I absolutely love this part of Adlerian psychology, and it's what makes it quite different to a lot of the kind of self-help theories that are out there that can be very kind of me focused in a way. It's also partly why I'm called the social therapist, in case you're interested. So social interest is essentially the movement from being very me focused to being other focused, right? It's a term that was coined by Adler to describe our innate sense of connection to others and our desire to contribute to the common good. And it is one of the best measures of mental health. When clients come to see me, part of what I am doing, part of my overall goal for them is actually to be increasing their social interest. You will know if you ever struggle with your mental health that when we are depressed, when we are anxious, and when we struggle with some of the more severe mental illnesses, it moves us away from society, right? It's very difficult for us to be around people. We withdraw. Everything becomes very personal in a way. When we are at our best in terms of our mental and emotional health, we are able to be interested in the interests of others. We can see different perspectives. We are able to feel like we can contribute to the world in a meaningful way. So, taking things personally, it narrows our focus to, well, what does this mean about me? Right? What do they think of me? How am I coming across? Our world becomes really small and self-focused. Social interest shifts our perspective outward. Instead of, oh, they must be annoyed at me, we can ask, well, actually, what's the most generous way of interpreting this? How can I give this person the benefit of the doubt? Is there another way of saying this? I'm not going to automatically jump to the conclusion that they must be annoyed at me. And suddenly our world expands. It helps us to build connections with people. It strengthens our relationships. We feel much more part of the world. We feel a greater sense of belonging. So when we're personalizing things, it's a very fear-based position, right? It must be me. It must be about me. I must have done something. It must be my fault. Social interest is a freeing way to be in the world. It actually might not be about me at all. It helps us move from being hyper alert or hypersensitive to rejection to knowing confidently and securely that we belong in the world. It helps us go from that self-protective mode of self-blame and self-judgment to actually being able to contribute, to be curious, to be willing to stay present and open in certain situations rather than closing down or withdrawing. It helps you to view others, or it stops you from viewing others as being above you, and it helps you to see yourself as equal and as capable. So here are a few small practices to help you start building social interest. So you can ask yourself the very simple question, what might the other person be going through right now? Right? What might be going on for them? What else might be going on here? When you're in social situations, instead of becoming very self-conscious and self-focused, we can learn to start asking questions, to practice active listening, to be curious about the other person, to focus much more on the other person than on how we're coming across, right? That moves us out of that sense of being really self-conscious. It's to learn to pause when we're triggered and to say things like, this might not actually be about me. In fact, it's probably not about me. And then in terms of just other little daily practices, it's learning to do things for other people, even when we feel vulnerable, even when that social connection, what's going on in the space between me and another person, let's say a friend, feels vulnerable. It's actually, instead of going into those defenses or to withdraw, is to do thoughtful things for somebody else, to think about the other person. And it's to get curious instead of shutting down, right? And sometimes just to stick with the discomfort and learn to say, hey, hang on a second, is everything actually okay between us? I've noticed that something feels a bit off. And, automatically my narrative is to think that I've done something. And I just want to check in with you. Is everything okay between us? So let's pause for a moment. I know this has been a whistle-stop tour. It has been a huge amount of information that I have just been sharing with you. But I want you to just think for a moment, what would change if you could stop taking things personally? What would change if deep down you believed that you were good enough? How would your life be different? Just think about that for a moment. These things are not easy, right? It is not a quick fix. I'm not promising you or selling you something that you're going to instantly be able to do or instantly be able to fix. When you think about it, most of us have had, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of believing certain things, of thinking in a certain way, and we're not going to undo that overnight. It takes time to rewire our brain, to reframe those ways of thinking, but it is possible. And I see it in my clients all of the time. I see it in the work that I do in the community. I've seen it in my own life. It is possible to change the way of being in the world and our ways of thinking about things. And the goal is never perfection, right? We're not going to get to the place where we don't ever feel insecure, that we don't ever feel anxious or feel inferior. But actually, the goal is to get to the point where we feel a lot more robust emotionally. Our sense of self feels a lot more secure. It doesn't kind of waver all the time when it comes to what other people think of us. So what matters most is movement, right? It's trying to go from getting stuck in these ways of thinking and stuck in these ways of behaving to starting to create a little tiny little bit of movement. And that is just about making small changes in the right direction. That's what leads to lasting change. In Adlerian therapy, we talk about how it's insight plus action is what leads to change. That's the kind of magic formula in a way. So getting the insight into ourselves, that self-awareness, that understanding the why bit, plus the action, the starting to challenge our thoughts, challenge those assumptions, changing the ways that we think, behaving differently, that's what's going to lead to lasting change. So I'm sure you're wondering, right, where do I go with this? What next? A couple of little things. If you have not downloaded already my free guide to the four different Adlerian lifestyle types, you'll find the link in my Instagram bio, but I will also send it out in an email. So this is the four different Adlerian lifestyles that Adler talks about are people pleasing, control, moral superiority, and avoidance. And I've written a 15-page guide to the Adlerian lifestyles with a little quiz at the beginning that you can do to find out what you think you are. Maybe you can think about what other people are what is the kind of dominant lifestyle for you, the dominant kind of protective strategies that you go into. And there's lots of information there about how to understand that more, how to start to make changes. But if you're interested in going deeper, if you sort of think, right, this is the path that I'm on, I really need to keep working on this in terms of overcoming inferiority. This is what I'm realizing is at the heart of the stuff that I'm struggling with, and that I find difficult. Well, I am very excitedly creating in the background an online digital course. It's going to be a self-study course with lots of different modules and lots of these things. It's going to be lots of Adlerian insights and tools, a little bit like what we've done tonight. And I'm going to put it all into a course. It's going to be something, I don't know what it's going to be called yet, but something to do with overcoming inferiority. And I'm really, really excited to put that together and to share that with you as something extra that is going to be really helpful and useful in this journey. If you've got 30 seconds, I would absolutely love to hear your feedback on this webinar. Send me a DM, send me an email in any way that you can. Send me a little bit of what's been helpful, what you liked about it, if there's anything that you would change in future. And it is so helpful for me and my learning and my reflections, but it's also really helpful to share sometimes some of that feedback with other people when they're thinking about this kind of webinar. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope it has been really useful and helpful, and I'll see you soon.